The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. A janitor who never earned more than $11 an hour died, leaving behind an $8 million fortune, and the Harvard economists studying him couldn't explain how. The book is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, and before you think this is just another finance book full of charts and spreadsheets, let me stop you right there. There are no complicated investment strategies here. No get-rich-quick formulas. What Housel does instead is something far more powerful. He looks at the messy, emotional, deeply human side of money and why so many smart people make terrible financial decisions, while some ordinary people with average incomes end up incredibly wealthy. The answer, as you will discover, has almost nothing to do with intelligence. Let us start with one of the most eye-opening ideas in the entire book. Housel argues that doing well with money has very little to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you behave. Think about that for a second. We live in a world that worships financial genius. We celebrate hedge fund managers and stock market wizards. But Housel points out something startling. There are doctors, lawyers, and engineers with brilliant minds who consistently make disastrous financial choices. And then there are people with modest educations and ordinary jobs who quietly build enormous wealth over their lifetimes. The difference is behavior. The difference is psychology. Here is the hook that should make you lean in. Your behavior around money is shaped by when and where you were born, what your parents taught you, and what experiences you lived through during your most impressionable years. Someone who grew up during the Great Depression developed a completely different relationship with risk and saving than someone who came of age during the roaring stock market of the 1990s. Neither person is wrong. They are simply products of their own unique financial experiences. And here's the problem. We walk around judging each other's financial decisions as if we all share the same history, the same context, and the same emotional framework. We do not. This is why financial arguments between people who both seem intelligent often go absolutely nowhere. Now let us talk about one of the most uncomfortable concepts in the book, and honestly, one of the most liberating ones. Housel introduces the idea of luck and risk, and he does it in a way that will genuinely shake your worldview. He uses the story of Bill Gates to make this point. Gates attended one of the only high schools in the entire United States that had a computer in the early 1960s. The odds of that happening were astronomical. His success story is brilliant and real, but luck placed him in exactly the right room at exactly the right moment in history. Does that take anything away from his genius? Not at all, but it does remind us that outcomes in life are never purely the result of skill or effort alone. And then there is the other side of this coin, risk. Housel talks about a friend of Gates named Kent Evans, who had just as much potential and drive as Gates himself. Evans died in a mountaineering accident before he ever got the chance to prove what he was capable of. One person got lucky. One person ran into the devastating randomness of risk. Both outcomes happened to equally talented people. The lesson here is humbling. Be careful about who you praise too loudly for their success, and be even more careful about who you blame too harshly for their failures. The role of luck and risk in any financial story is far larger than we are ever comfortable admitting. Are you still with me? Good, because we are just getting started and things are about to get even more interesting. Let us talk about what Housel calls never enough. This might be the chapter that hits hardest for most people. He tells the story of Rajat Gupta, who grew up with nothing, worked his way to becoming the CEO of McKinsey, one of the most prestigious consulting firms on the planet, and became worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And then he threw it all away by engaging in insider trading because he wanted to be a billionaire like the people he was surrounding himself with. He had more money than most humans will ever dream of, and it was not enough. He ended up in prison. Housel also references the story of Bernie Madoff, who ran a perfectly legitimate and highly profitable business before deciding to run a fraudulent one. He was already rich. There was no financial reason to risk everything, but enough was never enough. This pattern shows up everywhere. And here is where Housel drops a truth that should stay with you permanently. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. When you earn more, you want more. When you reach your goal, a new goal appears on the horizon. Social comparison constantly resets your baseline. You start looking at people above you rather than recognizing how far you have already come. The cure for this is knowing what enough looks like for you personally, not for your neighbor, not for the person you follow on social media, but for you. And that number might be far smaller than your ego is currently telling you. Now here is a concept that sounds almost too simple, but carries profound weight. Housel writes at length about the power of compounding and why the human mind is genuinely terrible at understanding it intuitively. Warren Buffett is one of the wealthiest people in the history of the world. He is widely celebrated as the greatest investor who ever lived. But here is something that rarely gets mentioned. The vast majority of his wealth was accumulated after his 50th birthday. He started investing as a child, but his net worth exploded in the later decades of his life, not because his investing got dramatically better, but because compounding had decades and decades to do its invisible work. Housel uses a striking comparison. There was another investor named Jim Simons who ran a fund that actually generated higher annual returns than Buffett over a comparable period. Higher returns. But Simons started later in life, so compounding had less runway to work with. He ended up with a fraction of Buffett's wealth. The lesson is not that returns do not matter. The lesson is that time matters more than almost anyone fully appreciates. Getting wealthy and staying wealthy over long periods requires patience that feels almost unnatural in a culture obsessed with speed, shortcuts, and instant results. Let us pause here because I want you to really absorb what we have covered so far. Behavior beats intelligence. Luck and risk are always in the room. Knowing you're enough changes everything. And time is the most powerful financial force available to anyone. Keep watching because the next set of ideas might be the ones that finally unlock something for you personally. Housel dedicates significant attention to the difference between getting rich and staying rich. These are two completely different skill sets, and they require almost opposite personalities. Getting rich often demands taking risks, being bold, putting yourself out there, and not being afraid to fail spectacularly. But staying rich requires humility, caution, and the constant acknowledgement that the market or life in general can take things away from you at any moment. The people who build lasting wealth combine both qualities. They are willing to take smart risks to grow, but they are equally committed to avoiding the kind of catastrophic mistakes that wipe everything out. This connects to one of Housel's most important ideas in the book, and he calls it survival. He argues that the single most important thing you can do for your long-term financial health is to make sure you survive. That means never putting yourself in a position where a single bad event or a single bad year can eliminate you from the game entirely. He calls this the importance of having room for error, or as he phrases it, planning for your plan not going according to plan. Build in margins. Do not use maximum leverage. Do not assume your best case scenario is guaranteed. Assume things will go wrong, because occasionally they will, and you need to still be standing when they do. Here is another concept that should make every person working a 9-to-5 job feel incredibly seen. Housel talks about tails, and he means something very specific. In finance and in life, the majority of outcomes cluster in the middle. But a tiny percentage of extreme outcomes drive almost everything. The majority of all stock market returns come from a very small handful of trading days spread over many years. Most businesses fail, but a tiny number become so successful they define entire industries. Most creative projects disappear, but a small number become cultural phenomena. The takeaway here is not depressing, it is actually freeing. When most things go wrong or produce mediocre results, that is completely normal. You only need a few things to go spectacularly right for the whole journey to be worth it. Now let us get into one of the most counterintuitive arguments in the entire book. Housel argues that wealth is not what you see. This sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but the implications are enormous. When you see someone driving a Ferrari or wearing designer clothes or living in a massive house, your brain automatically assumes they are wealthy. But Housel points out something crucial. Spending money is the opposite of having it. The person who buys the Ferrari is demonstrating that they had that amount of money at some point. The truly wealthy person might be driving a regular car, living below their means, and quietly accumulating assets that no one else can see. Real wealth is financial options and flexibility. It is the ability to say no to things you do not want to do. It is freedom. And ironically, the most effective way to build that kind of wealth is to stop trying to look like you have it. This section of the book is one I would love you to share with someone in your life who needs to hear it right now. Tag someone in the comments below who this reminds you of. Let us keep building because we are not done yet. Housel writes beautifully about the value of saving money even when you have no specific reason to save. Most financial advice tells you to save for a goal, save for a house, save for retirement, save for your children's education. Housel flips this around and argues that saving money without a specific goal in mind is actually one of the most powerful things you can do. Why? Because life is unpredictable. The future will bring opportunities and challenges that you literally cannot imagine right now. Having savings gives you the flexibility to respond to both. It is not about preparing for a specific event. It is about being ready for an unspecified future that will definitely surprise you. Here is where things get psychologically fascinating. Housel digs into the concept of reasonable versus rational. You might expect a book about financial behavior to tell you to always be perfectly rational. Make the mathematically optimal decision every single time. But Housel argues something entirely different. He says being reasonable is actually more achievable and more sustainable than being perfectly rational. A perfectly rational investor would never panic sell during a market crash, but real human beings experience fear. A strategy you can actually stick to during the terrifying, chaotic, stomach-dropping moments of a market downturn is worth far more than a theoretically perfect strategy you will abandon the moment things get frightening. He uses the example of people who hold certain investments because they have a personal connection to them. Strictly rational analysis might say to sell, but if holding that investment helps the person stay invested at all, stay in the game, and not panic sell their entire portfolio, then the emotional component actually served them well. Perfect rationality on paper is often worse than imperfect but sustainable behavior in practice. We are in the final stretch now, so let me bring you to some of the most powerful closing ideas in this book. Housel writes about how our relationship with money is deeply personal and shaped by things we can barely articulate. He talks about how different people have genuinely different goals. Some people want maximum wealth, some want maximum freedom, some want security above all else, some want to fund experiences and memories. None of these goals is wrong, but the catastrophic mistake is copying someone else's financial playbook without asking whether their goals match yours. A strategy that makes perfect sense for one person's life can be completely inappropriate for another person's circumstances and values. He also explores the way stories shape our financial reality more than most people acknowledge. Markets move based on narratives. Economic decisions are driven by stories people tell themselves and each other about the future. Housel is honest that the future is genuinely unpredictable, and anyone claiming to know exactly what will happen is either wrong or selling something. The appropriate response to financial uncertainty is not paralysis. It is building a life and financial plan that can survive a wide range of possible futures rather than betting everything on one specific outcome. One of the most quietly powerful chapters deals with the price of things. Housel argues that everything worth having in the world of money comes with a price, and the price is rarely in dollars. The price of long-term investment returns is the stomach-churning volatility you have to endure along the way. The price of building a business is the years of uncertainty, sacrifice, and failure before anything works. The price of financial freedom is years of living below your means while others around you spend freely. He frames these prices not as punishments, but as admission fees. You are not being cheated when the market drops 20%. That volatility is the fee you pay for the long-term gains. Reframe the price as fair, and you will stop trying to avoid it and start accepting it as a necessary part of the journey. Finally, Housel ends with an argument for knowing your own game. Not everyone is playing the same financial game. A day trader has completely different goals and time horizons than a person saving for retirement. A long-term investor should never let the behavior of short-term traders influence their decisions. One of the biggest sources of financial chaos in people's lives is taking financial advice from someone who is playing a fundamentally different game than they are and not realizing it. So here is what I want you to take from this breakdown of the psychology of money. The way you think about and behave around money is more important than any strategy, formula, or financial product ever invented. Behavior beats intelligence every single time. Compounding rewards patience above all else. Knowing you're enough is a superpower. Survival is the foundation of all wealth, and the price of every good financial outcome is one worth paying. If this video gave you even one insight that shifts how you think about your financial life, please hit that like button right now, because it truly helps this channel reach more people who need to hear these ideas. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this one, where we take powerful books and distill them into ideas you can actually use. And drop a comment below telling me which concept from this video hit you the hardest. I read every single one. I will see you in the next one.